It's time for the final word in sports all across the state. You're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts, Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, the final football Friday night here on Sports Talk, except for high school football championship next week. In terms of the collegiate teams, and of course, Wofford can continue for a little bit longer should the Terriers win tomorrow at Kennesaw State. But for the most part, this is the final football Friday night till we get to the bowl season. It's a championship weekend for Clemson, Tigers, and Pitt meeting in what will be wet and rainy Charlotte tomorrow night. Press conference there today. We were there for that. Let you hear from Dabo Swinney here coming up in a little bit. South Carolina preparing for Akron tomorrow at noon in Columbia. Could be some weather there as well. Gamecocks trying to get to 7 wins on the season and build on that offensive performance of last week and carry a good feeling into their bowl game, which I think is going to be, and we'll find out Sunday afternoon after all the major bowls are filled and they get into the next level. I figure South Carolina is going to the Belk Bowl.
Really?
I do. I do. Just looking at how things are falling into place. I mean, it's either the Gator or the Belk.
Well, those are the two that I think it's between right now. Those two.
Well, if you look at it, if it's Texas A&M and South Carolina for the Gator Bowl, Texas A&M beat South Carolina.
Right.
Now, how much of that weighs on? See, remember now, it's everybody says, well, the Gator Bowl is going to want South Carolina because of attendance. The SEC has as much to do with who is plugged in where, and working with the bowl in cooperation.
And I know they do actually get from the teams like a wish list,
Sure,
if you will.
Sure they do, but they don't always listen to it.
Correct.
And so they'll look at head to head, and who's more deserving and the better record and the TV ratings. What does ESPN think? Et cetera, et cetera. It makes sense to me. Either one would make sense for South Carolina, but if you're looking at it in terms of the season and the SEC, certainly Texas A&M with a better record and a win over South Carolina would be more deserving of Jacksonville than South Carolina would be.
Selfishly, Belk Bowl would be best for us because that means we get them both on the same day. Because if Clemson does make it to the playoff with a win, it means the Belk Bowl would be played on the 29th, and it would lead right into Clemson playing whoever they would play in the playoff.
If the Tigers get there.
If the Tigers get there.
Now there's talk of Clemson, of course, ending up in Dallas.
Is there?
Yes. The Orange Bowl put out a what would you call it? Just information.
Primer?
Yeah, just put out information on the process yesterday, and in the process, it said it's also possible that Clemson as the 2 seed could end up in the Cotton Bowl because Alabama as the 1 seed gets the geographic first pick, or the committee tries to take care of the number 1 seed first, and so they could put them in the Orange Bowl.
Dallas is not. I mean, they're both. I wouldn't say Dallas is genuinely that much further away from Alabama as Miami is. I mean, they're both. Neither of them is really close to each other, I would say.
Well, I think it depends also here what plays out at the number. Well, of course, we know Notre Dame is locked in one of the top 4 positions. Now, what's going to happen with Oklahoma? I mean, the question marks would be Georgia, Oklahoma, Ohio State. Georgia, if they win, of course, they're in. And what does that mean? Does Alabama stay in? So that's 2 SEC teams, Notre Dame and Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
If that happens, right? And that's going to upset a lot of people, especially if Oklahoma and Ohio State win. If Georgia loses to Alabama, then you're talking Alabama and Clemson wins. You're talking Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and then Oklahoma, Ohio State. And is Ohio State going to beat Northwestern impressively enough to jump Oklahoma?
Right.
If Oklahoma beats Texas? Those are all the questions to be answered tomorrow.
It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting to see it all happen. And the one thing that I am looking forward to, at least from the standpoint of where the college football playoff sits, is I'm looking forward to whatever justification is made if, say, Alabama and Georgia is close, if they try to justify Georgia being in there again in the top 4. I'm very, very much looking forward to that because of the fact that if you shut a Big Ten team out of the playoff for a second year in a row, that means you have to think that 8, if it's not coming, it is coming sooner than we possibly thought it could be.
Also today at the ACC press conference or shortly thereafter, they announced that the launching of the ACC network August 22nd next year. The week after, August 29th, and that's a Thursday night, the first game on the network will be Georgia Tech at Clemson. So welcome to the world of home Thursday night football games, Tigers. I think they've had it before. But one thing that Clemson has always asked for from the ACC and ESPN, no home Thursday night games because it just disrupts the campus. They have to really shut down the campus and cancel classes. But welcome to the land of the ACC network where you're going to have to do a lot of things that maybe you don't want to do to feed that network and provide them with the broadcast that they want.
Well, it's weird, the way that these things usually work, at least just looking from the SEC's perspective, the way that the television works is that usually ESPN gets the first pick, at least in the SEC packet. CBS gets the first pick, but then ESPN gets the next selection to kind of put games on their flagship network, kind of where they want to, and then the rest just end up on the conference network. This is really, I would say, maybe one of the only times you would think that Clemson would even appear on the network for a football game because most of their games, given the premium nature of the way that they've played over the last couple of years, have been ticketed for either the ABC or ESPN part of that television package. So this is probably, in the standpoint of the conference, a creative way to ensure that, hey, at least get one of those games on their network.
And you have a disturbing story to talk about related to South Carolina, Akron.
Yeah, I didn't really want to talk about this, but people were wondering if we wanted to talk about it, and it's made the sporting news, and it's made a couple of local TV stations. But South Carolina was trying to do something nice and basically give away some tickets to Saturday's game against Akron, basically to community groups and military personnel here in the Midlands to try and basically get some more attendance. Obviously, this is not as much of a demand game as it would have been had it been played on its original day, and because really there's nothing in stellar for South Carolina in that regard. Well, there was a glitch in the software. And
always a glitch.
A glitch in the software that made the tickets available for everybody, and there have been allegedly some Clemson fans who, I guess, got access to these tickets. I guess there was a limit of 8 you could possibly reserve for yourself, and you would get the tickets. Well, Clemson fans apparently were gobbling up these tickets and saying that they were going to have them and just not use them, and they were bragging about it on Twitter. And that's the thing about social media. If you brag about something on Twitter that you did that was bad, it's going to come back and bite you. And if you are a Clemson fan who has done this, that's just savage, man. I'm sorry. That's not cool. Like, I mean, South Carolina is trying to do something for its fan base.
But how many the tickets are going for what? $45 regular price?
I think that's the regularly priced.
So, I mean, how much money do you want to spend just to keep other people from
They're
going
not spending
to the
money.
game?
No, they're not spending the money. They're taking tickets that were free.
Oh, the freebie tickets.
The freebie
I
tickets.
got you.
They're taking free tickets and just saying, I'm gonna reserve these seats, not use them because they want to see the building empty, or because they want to try to embarrass South Carolina.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, this is the things that happen to Robbie." No, that's bad, man. That's petty and bad pool.
It really is. That is very. I wish they could identify these people, and but how can you? And what could you do if you did?
And apparently they're going on some of the Gamecock message boards and saying things like, I've got these, and I'm not going to make it. I'm just not going to make it. But they're saying it like in a way that's kind of
Well, I mean, that's taking the
snarky.
rivalry to a new low.
That's bad.
I mean, you should be ashamed of yourself. If you did that, you should really be ashamed.
And again,
of
I
yourself.
didn't want to necessarily draw attention to it from the standpoint of
It's out there. You can't ignore it.
bad actors, but at the same time, it's just like again, that's just bad. It's just bad stuff.
Mike Houston did not take the Charlotte job. Some reports this week had him taking the Charlotte job after being offered. He did not take it. And so they've pulled that offer back because now he's being heavily rumored for the job at East Carolina. He's still the head coach at James Madison, the former Citadel coach. He's got his team again in the playoffs. He's 37-5 there in 3 years at James Madison. He's got a national championship there. So nothing was ever finalized. And today, the Charlotte AD publicly said, we're taking the offer back because Mike Houston had gone public to say, yes, I've got this offer, but nothing has been finalized yet. Bruce Feldman said Houston and Charlotte had reached an agreement. Oops, not so. And Houston said that he'd been offered but indicated no agreement had been set in stone. And so now apparently he could be the guy to go to East Carolina, which would be a great hire by them. All right, we'll be right back.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
In addition to all the football we're talking about today, there is a basketball game to be played tonight at Colonial Life Arena. The Gamecocks taking on Coastal Carolina. South Carolina sitting at 3-3. Their first full game, at least without Justin Minaya, at least without knowing now that how long he's going to be out. Of course, they didn't play with him last week, earlier this week against Wofford, but he'll be out indefinitely with that knee surgery that should get him back around January. But Coastal and South Carolina. Coastal gave USC a run a little bit last year. Jalen Shaw had a lot to do with that, but we'll see whether or not South Carolina can rebound off the loss of the Terriers. And you were in Charlotte today to hear from Dabo and Pat Narduzzi.
Yeah, and I want to touch on what I mentioned earlier about Clemson, the Cotton Bowl, real quick. Here is some of what the Orange Bowl put out, saying that geography a factor, giving a proximity preference to the number 1 seed first, and then if possible, the number 2. So, for example, if a Southern, Northeast, or Midwest team is number 1, a Southwestern team is number 4, they most likely would be in the Orange Bowl, because sending that game to the Cotton Bowl would give an advantage to the lower seed. Conversely, if a Southwestern team is number 1 and a Southern, Northeast, or Midwest number 4, the game most likely would end up in the Cotton Bowl. Now, Clemson's IPTAY offices sent out a reminder to Clemson fans of that possibility, that you have to be prepared to go to the Cotton Bowl and buy your tickets. If the Tigers are fortunate enough, as they put it, to make it to the playoff, the Cotton Bowl is also a possible destination along with the Orange Bowl.
Dallas is 2 hours driving closer to Alabama than it is Miami. Just letting you know.
Fort Lauderdale. But most people seem to think Alabama would be set for.
I think that's
no. I guess they would think it would be set for the Cotton Bowl.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
that's what it should be. I think.
Yeah. Here is Dabo Swinney from earlier today. David Shelton coming up to preview tonight's high school statewide semifinals. But first, Dabo Swinney talking about Pitt.
Pitt is a tough, physical team. That's really, if you know anything about Pat, man, that's kind of who he is, and his team epitomizes everything that I think he stands for, and has really in his whole coaching career. They're going to challenge us in every regard. Defensively, they're in your face. Linebackers are downhill. They're pressed outside. Safeties are downhill. They're incredibly disciplined. They know their system. They don't make a lot of busts, and they get after you. So I think they have 13 guys back last year that started 4 games or more. So this is one of the most experienced defenses that we've seen all year. And then on the flip side, offensively, man, if you don't have your mind right, you're in for a long night, because these guys are going to come right at you. They're toe-to-toe. They're going to get in that I formation, backed up, middle of the field, going in, fullback. Fullback's a heck of a player. And they're really good on the outside. They've done a nice job at receiver. The one kid that transferred in there, 11, I believe, has really come on the last part of the year here. He's got a huge average per catch. But both backs, one of them's right at 1,200 yards. The other one's right at 1,000 yards. So they just kind of hammer you. 3 runs, and then bam, 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 here comes some play action shot. But everything they want to do is be efficient in the run game. That's everything's going through that. A lot of shifts, a lot of motions, a lot of trades. Force you to have to be very disciplined in how you line up. They do a great job in coordinating their offense. And you think, we're just going to turn around and hand it off. But just they create angles and edges and extra gaps. And so how you fit that is critical. And it's not just the front level. It's the second level. It's the third level. It's where your backers, it's your run support from the secondary, everybody being on the same page. Because if you don't do it right, and you don't communicate it right, and then you don't have your eyes on the right things, they're going to expose you. Been impressed with them, studying them on tape, and they've played some tough teams too. They played Notre Dame undefeated, played Central Florida undefeated. They played a really good Penn State team. So they've seen some tough opponents in this season, and but at the end of the day, they won their division on the field and have earned the opportunity to be here. And it's what I tell our guys. It comes down to these 4 quarters. Doesn't matter what you've done in the previous. You don't get to carry that over. It comes down to this game It's not like baseball or basketball where it's a best of 7, best of 5, and, oh, well, we had a bad night, we'll play again tomorrow. No, it's a best of 1. So you better be ready for this moment. And we're excited about, again, representing the Atlantic and Clemson in this great championship event.
How do you feel about your defensive team's practice this week, and how satisfied are you that they're going to improve on those areas that were of concern last weekend?
Yeah, well, they've had a great week. I mean, they've responded well. We did not play well last week, but I thought South Carolina played great. And, their quarterback played lights out. Their receivers were outstanding, and they made some critical plays. But from our perspective on some things that we got to do better, we did not line up well. We were really poor with our eyes, and we did not leverage we didn't play proper technique and leverage. But we played hard. We played with great effort. They had some formational things that we didn't adjust well to. So we've had a great week. We've worked. It's a different presentation this week, but oftentimes in this business, it's kind of professional courtesy to just see if you fixed a few things. So I wouldn't be surprised to just see if they check our oil and make sure we fixed it. So we've worked hard. Our guys have had an awesome year. I mean, they've had an unbelievable year defensively. They had a bad night last week, but they did some good things too. But they were eager to get back to work this week, and I think we'll play well.
Choice of words there with the oil change analogy.
Well, I had my oil checked yesterday too. My annual physical. It's full. It's full for another year. Let's welcome in David Shelton, High School Sports Report, as we talk about the state semifinals of the high school playoffs tonight across the state. David, you got the big one down your way tonight. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think it's a good matchup for Dutch Fork. This will be the best defense they played all year. Summerville's got clearly the best defense that Dutch Fork has played. You kind of look at it this way. It's the numbers just are so mind-boggling with Dutch Fork that even if your defense cuts in half what they normally score, that's still 30 points.
Yeah.
So you got to find a way to score 31, and that's where the problem lies. I just don't know if Summerville is explosive enough offensively. Now, there'll be some tricks. Hunter Spivey will have a couple of tricks up his sleeve, and they'll do things to try to keep them in it. But, Dutch Fork has a chance, if they can win out this season, to become one of the best ever in this state's history. But it'll be an interesting game. I think if Summerville can score 3 or 4 touchdowns and make it interesting in the second half, Dutch Fork's never been pushed, so we'll see. But there's a reason Dutch Fork's never been pushed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're really good.
You telling me that there might be another Summerville special somewhere hidden in that playbook?
Yeah, there's gonna. I was at practice earlier this week. There are definitely there's a few wrinkles, and you know what? As Joe Call said, hey, we're not embarrassed to say that we've got to find a couple of trick things. They're very good, and he said, but if we can make those things work and give our kids some confidence, then we'll see what happens. But personally, I think Dutch Fork's going to win the game, and I think they're the better team. But I definitely think Summerville has a puncher's chance if they can stay in it. They got to stay in the game.
T.L. Hannah Burns, the other 5A game in the 4A playoffs. Greer, Daniel, Hartsville, Myrtle Beach. 3A, Union County, Chester, and Dillon Wade, Hampton. 2A, Southside Christian, Abbeville, and Barnwell, Carvers Bay. And 1A, Dixie, Lamar, and Greensea, Floyd's, Hemingway. Got about 30 seconds. I want to see if Jerry Brown can concoct something for Dillon tonight.
Yeah, I love Coach Brown. I mean, I really do, but it ain't happening tonight. I think this Dillon team, I've kind of said back in August, Dillon versus Chester, and I'm going to stick with that. And I hope that's what we get, because that would be a great matchup.
Well, we'll find out tonight how things play out. You'll join us on the high school scoreboards later on this evening. Enjoy your game, because you're going to perhaps have a classic. We shall see if Summerville can rise up. Thank you, David. Talk to you later.
Okay, guys.
David Shelton, High School Sports Report, and the Post and Courier in Charleston. High school scoreboards tonight, 10, 10:30, and 11. We'll have the scores for you. We also have that on our Twitter feed as well. You can catch the scores that way if you miss us over the airwaves. Back with the football filibuster in a moment. Time to welcome to Sports Talk two great Americans as we bring you another edition of the Football Filibuster, the last Football Filibuster until we buster it up for the bowl games in a couple of weeks after the holidays. We welcome in former Governor Jim Hodges. He always gets announced first because governor is above lieutenant governor. 3-2 last week, 40-25 overall. And then Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer, but he was 5-0 last week. Got a little help from the governor, who had a big heart and changed a pick. 5-0 last week, 39-26. Gentlemen, this is a dogfight. This will take a Florida recount type of examination by the time the day is over?
Well, I will say Andre has had 2 terrific weeks in a row, and you know what happens after you have 2 good weeks in a row? You have a bad week, which is what is going to happen here this week.
We shall see. Andre, are you ready? Are you fired up, pumped up, jacked up?
I'm ready, and it would not bother me a bit if Jim Hodges outpicks me on football picks. I can't think of a classier individual, and even though he's on the other side of the aisle, he's still my good friend. And it's been a very spirited year. I'm glad we've been able to keep it close to at least keep us fun, because for a while there, Jim was beating us so bad that it was getting to where it wasn't even fun.
Yeah, that's not the attitude we like here. We like
We
blood
want a
and
little bit
guts.
more. We want more
Come on.
Eminem boys like type trash talk here.
Of course,
Smackdown.
problem is they're both Gamecocks now. We get them on political stuff. They'll be at each other's throats, but they are both Gamecocks, so they kind of agree there. Okay, well, great week for you, Andre. So you've made this a race, and we've got 5 games tonight, and we'll do a bunch of bowl games after the holidays. So give you a chance to rest up and get your thoughts together for that. But let's get to tonight's games, and these are all, of course, related to championship games, except for USC and Akron, which we could call this the Tire Bowl or something, since Akron. When they make tires still in Akron, used to be the tire capital of the world. That's Firestone and all that kind of stuff.
Still checks out.
So, Andre, we'll let you lead off since you're trailing by 1 game now. 39-26 for you, 40-25 for the Gov. We begin with Ohio State and Northwestern, the Big Ten Championship. The upstart Wildcats are getting 14 points. Andre.
I'm going to take Ohio State. Had an incredible week last week, and I look for them to do the same this week.
Governor?
I agree. This game actually means something to Ohio State. I mean, they need a style win to be able to have a chance to get in the Final Four. Mm-hmm. I'll take Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute as far as who you think's going to end up in the 4. Let's go to the SEC Championship in Atlanta. It's Alabama-Georgia again. Georgia, almost a 2-touchdown dog, 13.5 points. The Dogs are getting Governor.
Too many points, I think. I think Alabama is going to win this comfortably, but I think 13.5, which is it's essentially a home game for Georgia, is too much. As good as Alabama is, I think Georgia will keep it within 10 points. So I'll take the points in Georgia.
Mm-hmm. Andre?
I'm going to take Alabama.
No. Roll Tide.
I think Alabama will. It's time for them to put the Dogs on. They've got to show the world who they are, and this is their best competition of the year outside of the Citadel in the first half of the game.
Yeah,
and that's true.
Yeah.
It is true. That's why I think you're
coaching
exactly
job
right.
by Citadel that first half of the game. Anyway, I think Alabama will cover.
I'm tired of doubting Georgia. I've doubted Georgia a lot this year. I'm not doubting them anymore. I mean, they'll lose, but they're going to lose within the spread, I think. Texas, Oklahoma. Sooners are laying 8. Andre.
I'm going to take Oklahoma.
Oklahoma. This, of course, in the Big 12 championship. It's a rematch, Oklahoma and Texas from earlier in the year. Governor, what do you think?
I am with the lieutenant governor on this. Again, style points. This is that Oklahoma needs to win and needs to win in a sound fashion to have any chance to get in the Final Four. I'll take Oklahoma.
And a revenge game also.
Yep.
And a revenge game. That's right. Whether the horns are up or horns are down, this is a revenge game.
All right, so the question is, if Ohio State wins impressively and Oklahoma wins but not impressively, does Ohio State jump Oklahoma?
I think they do. If because of what happened last week with Michigan, if Ohio State is on a run here at the end of the year with pretty sound wins, and Oklahoma shows no defense and has a close game against Texas, I think Ohio State makes it.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Andre?
I think the governor is more savvy at this than I am. He has done his homework.
You're just like, shut up and get to the next game.
I mean, the game Ohio State played last week, I mean, they couldn't. That scoreboard looked like a pinball machine.
Yeah.
And against a very good team, they did that too as an underdog. It's highly impressive. And of course, they got a good track record. I could very easily see them jumping up Oklahoma.
All right, let's go to Akron at USC. Gamecocks, of course, very happy to be playing on this particular Saturday. Of course, they want to be playing in Atlanta. Maybe next year. We shall see. They are 30-point favorites over Akron Governor.
I was really proud of the way Carolina's offense played against Clemson. I thought they looked terrific, and I believe that's going to carry over this week, and that they will beat Akron soundly. So I'm going to take the Gamecocks.
Laying to 30. Andre.
Yep.
I agree. They had an outstanding game last week. A couple of plays, and they'd have been totally in that game. 2 points, two touchdowns. It just didn't quite turn out our way, but they played an outstanding game. And I'm going to pick the Gamecocks to cover the spread.
Takes us to the ACC championship game. Clemson favored over Pitt, 27.5. Clemson has never beaten Pitt in football. Now, they've only played twice, once in the Gator Bowl and once at Clemson 2 years ago. And Tigers were upset, and they were pretty big favorites that day. Weather's going to be an issue to some degree. All that being said, Andre, what do you think?
This will not be Pitt's year. Clemson will beat them soundly.
Interesting.
You want to lay the 27.5?
Yep.
Governor?
I'm with him. Pitt can run, but they can't pass. And Clemson game showed that Clemson pass defense is suspect, but their run defense is great. It's going to be a really bad day for Pitt.
I thought you were going to say.
I think the Tigers will win it.
I thought you were going to say they can run, but they can't hide from the Tigers. Is what I thought you were going to say.
They probably can't do that either.
Yes.
They certainly can't throw the ball.
That would have worked there.
All right, now I take us into the point of the filibuster where we open up for amendments based on our Constitution. Andre, anything you want to change?
I think the only game we differed on was Alabama.
Alabama, Georgia. Everything else is the same.
This could be the game to put us back to even.
Yep. You're just going to play that strategy, huh?
I am.
Yeah, Governor, you care to amend?
No, I think we've got a pretty good contest this week. I'll keep it like it is.
Been a while since you've had this kind of heat on you. I mean, you've handled the competition. Well, I guess Governor Beasley beat you once.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. But for the most part, you've dominated.
Well, it's going to be fun. This is a good contest.
He beat Beasley once, too.
Oh, yeah, he beat Beasley like twice, I think. I think Beasley beat him once. Are you talking about in politics or in the filibuster? Huh?
I said I meant in a different way, actually.
We're not going to get into that. Hey, have a great weekend. Enjoy the football games, whatever you're doing. I guess, Andre, you're going on a long bike ride tomorrow?
I am. I actually came up to Traveler's Rest. I'm in the mountains for the weekend.
Going to work those legs.
I am.
Yeah. Governor, what are you doing? Sitting in the lazy boy watching football?
No, sir. I'm in New Orleans for the Governors Association meeting, so I will be at that tomorrow working.
Wait a minute, you're not a governor anymore, except when I identify you as governor.
I'm working. I've got work to do at the association meeting, so that's where I am.
When you're having a hurricane, go to the place catty corner from Pat O'Brien's and not Pat O'Brien's, because they make better hurricanes than Pat O'Brien's does.
That's
don't ask me.
Advice. I'll remember that.
Don't ask me how I know.
Guys, as always, we thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Governor, stay out of trouble there in New Orleans. They're in a bad mood after the Saints got hammered last night.
I've told you how much I just absolutely love New Orleans.
Does anybody care?
I just love New Orleans.
Okay. Well, I love Irmo. You love New Orleans. I love Irmo. Does anybody care?
But there is no Louisiana sports talk.
I love Latta. I love Lakeview.
You love Schuler's Barbecue.
I don't like Dillon. All right. Back in a moment.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
We are back at Sports Talk on a Friday night. We get you some professional help now. We welcome in Lee Sterling, ParamountSports.com, 3-0 last week. Woohoo! A 50-unit play this weekend, last big play of the regular season. And the 100-unit play that Lee had 3 weeks ago with the Packers over Miami, he hit that right on the button. So as we go to Lee, you're red hot, my friend, just like we like you.
Yeah, and hopefully it continues, and we ride it through the holidays and college football bowl season and NFL playoffs. So got something big brewing again on Sunday. So don't have many of these games. In fact, in 27 years, only 15 50-unit plays, and we're 13-2 on them. So we're going to look to up our record to 14-2. They want to hop on board. They can purchase the game individually. They can get it with all my games this weekend, championship weekend in college football and the NFL, or they can get the rest of the season. Still a lot of football to be played. 4 weeks of the NFL, 41 bowl games, NFL playoffs and Super Bowl. Just go to ParamountSports.com.
All right, sounds good. Let's get to tonight's games and see if you can extend that unbeaten streak. Let's begin. Let's see. Let's start with the SEC championship game. You've got Alabama laying 13 against Georgia.
Well, you know, this line's coming down, and I don't get it. It's down. It started at 13, down to 11.5, 12, a lot of places now. I think people are playing on the fact that Georgia only lost the game last year by 3 points. But once Tua came in at quarterback for Alabama, I mean, it was a different game. They outscored Georgia in the second half in that one possession in overtime, 26-10. Judging by watching Alabama, to get to them and slow them down, you got to slow down their offense, and you got to get into his face. Probably not going to throw many interceptions. He's thrown only 2 this year, so you got to get him to punt the ball at least 4 or 5 times, and that's the problem for Georgia. Their weakness is getting to the quarterback, and they only rank 101 out of 130 teams in team sacks, 118 out of 130 in teams and tackles for loss, both dead last in the SEC. This Alabama team special. They've scored at least 49 points in 8 of the 12 games and beaten every team by 20 points. You know when the last team did it? It was in 88. Did guess the team, guys?
88?
88. Beat every team by 20 points.
88. That would have been Notre Dame?
Nope. How about this? It wasn't 1988. It was 1888. Yale Bulldogs.
You got me.
Roll Tide, 45-21.
See, I'm thinking I've been, taking shots at Georgia all year, but they always prove me wrong. And I don't know. I think they got a little something extra. Their offense is still very, very good. But, you're probably right. You're red hot.
See.
I'm not.
Hey, I'd love to see it. I'd love to be wrong. If I'm going to be wrong in one game, I think it's great to have superpowers. But when a team dominates, and if Alabama wins like 3 or 4 straight, I don't think it's good for college football.
All right, let's go to South Carolina laying 30 against Akron in Columbia.
Here's the problem with Akron. They can't score. South Carolina, 2 other down-in-class games. They played Coastal Carolina and Chattanooga. Mm-hmm. And Coastal Carolina scores 15, Chattanooga 9. And Coastal and Chattanooga average 22 points per game in their conference. Akron averages 16 points in the MAC, and they don't play a lick of defense in the MAC. I think you're going to see a lot of Jake Bentley to Deebo Samuel, running backs running free all day long. South Carolina 48-6.
Yeah, I think they pick up on where they left off with their offense against Clemson and try and build on that, which takes us to the Tigers, favored by 27 against Pitt.
Yeah, and this Pitt team had a nice dress rehearsal last week. They get to play Miami, maybe not as good a defense as Clemson, but ranked number 2 in the country. What do? They only put up 2,200 total yards in that game.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be balanced, and you got to be able to throw the ball some on Clemson. This is an era of modern football. Pitt has only thrown for 200 yards once all season. this Clemson defense, if they had played South Carolina and won 42-10, then you got to think that maybe they might overlook Pitt here. But after giving up 35 and only getting one takeaway, I'm sure they're bringing that up to the defense in the last 3 games. They are going to be motivated. And Clemson's put up at least 38 points, 3 straight ACC championship games. They're going to be ready to go. I like Clemson 45-10.
No, I agree. I think they cover. All right, real quick. Yep. Oh, your game of the week, by the way, is going to be UCF and Memphis. The UCF only favored by 3. Oh, I guess they're looking at the quarterback situation.
Star quarterback. We're going to find out whether a lot of people play teams when they lose that star. We're going to see if that theory holds out, or can Memphis upset them, or does UCF win 25 straight? Just call 800-400-9741. Give you that game for free. 800-400-9741. And like I said, don't have many of these. Maybe once every year or two, a 50-unit play. You want to hop on board. It's available. ParamountSports.com.
Before you leave us, give us your 4 in the order you think they'll be placed by the committee.
I think Oklahoma's going down. And I think if Central Florida, if McKenzie had not gotten hurt, I think they would have gotten in. But I have a feeling that it's going to be Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Ohio State.
And do they put – we're just reading about this. I mean, do they put Alabama, Ohio State, would they put them in the Orange Bowl or the Cotton Bowl?
I think they're going to put them in the Cotton Bowl.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we were just talking about distances.
What would your guess be on that?
Well, just reading various things from the Orange Bowl. The Orange Bowl put something out yesterday indicating how it might not be Clemson in the Orange Bowl, and Clemson could be going to the Cotton Bowl, and depending on geographic locations of number 1 and number 4 and all that kind of stuff.
Anything can happen. I think don't they get the pick or no?
Well, I mean, they try to put the number 1 seed in it closest to its region, and actually the Cotton Bowl is closer to Tuscaloosa than Miami is.
Right.
In terms of actual distance. So
that's why I think they're going to do that. A little bit of history here. How about this? The president of the Orange Bowl committee, Eric Palms, my next door neighbor growing up. How's that for a coincidence?
That's tight.
Yeah.
You can
I always get a lot of calls
for tickets
from telling me, I guess he gives a bunch of speeches, how he got into it. I used to force the kid to play flag and tackle football in my backyard and on the street. So, I guess he had no choice, and then he was I think he was student manager for the Florida basketball team under Norm Sloan back in the day.
It's good to have connections, my man. Good to have
connections. If you ever meet Eric Palms, just tell him Lee Sterling.
You got it. Thank you, man. Have a great weekend.
Okay, take care.
Take care now. All right, let's hit you up with some recruiting here real quick before the top of the hour. Defensive end Brian Bressie of Damascus, Maryland, named his top 6 today. Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Georgia, Alabama, number 1 defensive end in the 2020 class. 2020 receiver George Odemegwu, Spring Hill, Tennessee, plans to visit USC tomorrow. Florida coaches were in to see USC target cornerback Chris Steele last night. USC defensive coordinator Travaris Robinson was in the home of cornerback Jadon Hill last night. Tennessee was in last night to see defensive back Jamie Robinson, USC target. Receiver DJ Chisholm of Berkeley decommitted from East Carolina. Hammond, running back, and defensive back Cleo Carty was offered by Missouri Baptist. Georgia State's Sean Elliott and Josh Stepp were in Thursday at Hammond to check on quarterback Jackson Muschamp and linebacker tight end Saul Diaz, scheduled to be in next week to see Jordan Burch and Alex Huntley or Clemson in Oklahoma. Cornerback Zay Flowers of Fort Lauderdale had planned to be at USC this weekend, but he's got a game tonight. Not sure he'll make it. USC target defensive lineman Jaquez Sorrells had an in-home with Alabama this week. Clemson in to see Clay Webb and Quavaris Crouch today, according to Tiger Illustrated. Greenville High tight end Jimmy Frisch taking an official to Syracuse this weekend. And cornerback DeQuantius Watts is taking the SAT tomorrow, going to try to get to USC. Continues to hear from the Gamecocks. They're telling him he is a priority. He's going to wait until January to do things, including taking an official visit with the Gamecocks. Top of the hour.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, as we continue to get you ready for the weekend football here on South Carolina Radio Network. Will Pelagic back with you, and it's time for our weekly opposition research. We'll look at the Akron Zips playing South Carolina in a moment, but first, the ACC Championship game in Charlotte as Clemson faces Pittsburgh, a fourth different opponent for the Tigers going into their fourth consecutive ACC Championship game. Man, who is the radio analyst on the Pitt Radio Network with Bill Hillgrove and the folks there at the IMG Sports Network is Pat Bostic. He joins us here on Sports Talk. And, you know, Pat, I think a lot of Clemson fans remember this Pitt team from 2 years ago that came down to Death Valley and shocked the world, the lone blemish during Clemson's national championship year. How has Pitt changed since then, and how have they looked to you this year?
Yeah, so thanks for having me. And, remember that game fondly. That obviously was a big upset. This team is it's a different team. Obviously, there were a lot of critical players on that team, James Conner being most notable, Nathan Peterman at quarterback, that are no longer on this roster in the program. It's since moved on to the next level. New offensive coordinator for Pitt, Matt Canada, obviously orchestrated that offense that was able to put up so many points on the Tigers that night. He's at Maryland now. Sean Watson's been serving as offensive coordinator here at Pitt for the last 2 years. They've tried to maintain some of that identity with some of the jet sweeps and misdirection that became so common that year and seem to be all over football now. But this is a team that has relied heavily on two senior tailbacks, Darren Hall and Quadri Olson, who have been their bell cow. They've got a veteran offensive line. And, Kenny Pickett's been a young quarterback that's managed things well, but had only had one breakout game all year throwing the football. So they've been a run-heavy team, but defensively they're improved from 2 years ago. So I think the answer to your question is it's a different team and a different makeup.
One of the characterizations that was made by Dabo Swinney is that this is Boston College philosophically, but with more of a wide receiver base than tight end. How true is that characterization?
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, this is it's definitely downhill, hard-nosed football. A little bit more three wide than you see from BC. The Pitt is very thin at the tight end position. They had a young man leave the program in the middle of the year that was starting for him, and Tyler Sear. They've basically used an extra offensive lineman at tight end exclusively for the last 6 games. So you see a lot more three wide. And they like to use quicker slot type guys like Maurice French and Valik Carter as kind of de facto third wing backs with some of the jet sweeps and reverses. So I think it's a little bit different than BC, but the attitude's the same. They want to run the football. They unfortunately don't have the tight ends to complement that in the play action passing game like BC does.
Of course, we're talking with Pat Bostic from the Pittsburgh Radio Network, getting ready for the ACC Championship game. You mentioned the tailbacks, obviously, with the way that they kind of do things. How does the carry distribution kind of split there? Is it more of a hot hand scenario, or is it predetermined?
Yeah, it's hot hand, Will, to answer your question. You get Quadri usually starts, but Darren's in there second or third series. They'll put him in the game at the same time. Last year in the latter half of the season, Pitt had lost its fullback, George Aston, who is a terrific football player. And Darren Hall was the hot-handed tailback, so Olson actually played some fullback. And you'll see him play a little bit more of a role as kind of an H-back in certain scenarios. But in terms of carry distribution, it's hot hand, and they try to get those guys each 15-plus touches a game if they can.
It's looking at a lot the offensive line. The one thing I love when I see an offensive line is I see seniors across the board and know that there is a sophomore there at left guard according to the depth, but I see experience. And how much do you think that helps them going into this contest?
Yeah, it's an experienced group. They had a redshirt sophomore starting at center for him, Jimmy Morrissey, who got hurt against Wake Forest 2 weeks ago. So they bumped Connor Dentino to center. And Tino's a redshirt senior, played some defense early in his career, and it's just he's just a meat and potatoes guy, and has been plug and play at center, but Hargrove at left guard. They're experienced. That change up was difficult for him last week against Miami, who obviously has a great front as well. But having another week under their belt with that arrangement with a new center and guard, and with what you have at the right guard, right tackle, and left tackle position, it's a veteran group that's played a lot of football. They got 130 starts under their belt combined.
ACC Championship Weekend, doing opposition research with Pat Bostic here on South Carolina Radio Network. This is Sports Talk. Looking at the defense, one of the things that the coaching staff basically said was this is a group that doesn't necessarily disguise themselves. They play a lot of man coverage. They're going to be face up. They're going to be physical. How do you characterize what this defense brings to the table?
This is a Pat Narduzzi defense. From the days he was at Michigan State, they play a lot of quarters coverage with their corners, press man-to-man. The safeties are very active in the run game. Their leading tackler is Damar Hamlin, who's their field safety. They are built to stop the run and try to make you throw the ball down the sidelines and in tight quarters, and they'll bring some pressure. So the characterization that you offered is pretty accurate. They're an in-your-face defense. They want to stop the run. That'll be priority number one for them with Travis Etienne and what Clemson is able to do in the run game, second in the league. But they do rely on their corners being one-on-one out there. So there obviously are one-on-one opportunities to take advantage of for the opposition. It's just a matter of connecting.
I know. A lot of people nationally look at Clemson as kind of the head and shoulders ahead of everybody else in the conference. This Coastal Division kind of cannibalized itself. A lot of 500 in there with Miami, Virginia, and Virginia Tech, and of course Georgia Tech coming on of late, and you guys finishing at the top of the conference. But the non-con is honestly where I kind of look at Pitt, and I see a battle-tested group when you have to go down to UCF. You're at Notre Dame. You have Penn State earlier in the season. I know that only basically none of those necessarily ended up as victories, but from the standpoint of where they sit, how do you grade Pitt's battle-tested nature going into this game on Saturday?
That's a great point. I think they've been hardened by the tough non-conference schedule, and clearly two of those losses were lopsided. One at home, the loss to Notre Dame, preceded a bye week, an open week on the calendar where they took a hard look in the mirror and nothing changed schematically. There wasn't a kind of an aha moment or anything for either side of the ball or special teams, but they committed to being a better Pitt team and to what they were doing and being more efficient. And I think it's a testament to the group that they were able to win. Go 6-2 in the league with a lone loss to Miami at the end of the year, Carolina early, to really turn the season around after those losses. So they made it a positive that they went through that. They didn't use it as an excuse to throw in the towel. And with that being said, I think they are they played really good people. They're used to what that looks and feels like, and they'll be prepared to play the best team they've played all year. And on Saturday night. And
pending Saturday's result, Pat, obviously a prime bowl game could be in the offing and should be in the offing for Pittsburgh as a result of just the Coastal Championship. What does playing in this game and the fruits that come alongside of it mean for not only Pat Narduzzi, but for Pitt football here with him in year 4?
Anytime you can associate yourself with a championship, be it a division or conference or whatever, it's positive. And they're going to be on a stage where they're playing against the number 2 team in the country. And, that's what you want to sell, that when you come to Pitt, you're going to have a chance to play the best on the biggest stages. And that's what the Atlantic Coast Conference offers. This year we were able to take care of business in our division in the league and put ourselves in this position. And I know, having reached, got to that point now where you're in the championship game, just makes it a whole lot more real to sell to those recruits, that are looking to pick a spot to play and looking for an opportunity to make a name for themselves.
Pat Bostic from the Pitt Radio Network. Enjoy the chat. Safe travels to Charlotte.
Thank you very much for having me.
We'll take a look next at the Akron Zips with their radio voice, Steve French, as opposition research continues on Sports Talk.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network, as we continue to do a little opposition research this week. South Carolina not used to necessarily playing this week. This is normally the week that the team will play for the SEC championship. Those teams will practice, but South Carolina had its game against Marshall canceled, and of course the Hurricane rescheduled game comes against the Zips of Akron. The man who is the radio voice of the Akron Zips, Steve French, joins us here on Sports Talk to preview this team out of the MAC. And, you know, Steve, I think the one thing that stands out from this team is the victory at Northwestern. What has happened since then? And it seems that looking at the rest of the schedule, that seems like a very happy outlier, but still an outlier nonetheless.
Well, certainly it's an outlier. The Zips had not beaten a Big Ten team since the late 1800s, when there was no Big Ten, and Akron beat Ohio State. That was a crazy game. For people that don't know, Akron won at 39-34, and it really wasn't even that close. Northwestern hit a Hail Mary touchdown pass at the end of the game, and the Zips scored 36 points in the second half, which is more than they scored in any other FBS game all year long. They scored 3 defensive touchdowns all in the second half. 2 interception returns by Alvin Davis and a fumble recovery in the end zone. So you kind of make your own break. Hasn't been anything like that since then. Obviously, the Zips were 2-0 at the time, and now find themselves at 4-7 with a lot of close defeats really until this last week. Every Akron game, they were still in it going into the fourth quarter, including Iowa State, including Buffalo's 10-2. But whereas a year ago, when this week that we're talking about now, Akron was getting ready to play in the MAC championship game, this year, obviously that just hasn't happened.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, Terry Bowden obviously not afraid to kind of schedule the big boys. 3 very big schools right regionally there, with the Nebraska game that got canceled, Northwestern and Iowa State. What's the philosophy, I guess, from Bowden? I know that when you're sitting in the MAC, you kind of have to schedule up more than you schedule down. What's the scheduling philosophy of Bowden? It seems like this is a big load for a team that finished 4-7.
Right. Well, and I really had no idea. Well, until obviously this game was scheduled, I know that the Zips were looking for a 12th game, and one of the reasons for that was trying to get to 6-6, which isn't going to happen. But obviously, in the MAC this year, there's a couple of 6-6 teams that aren't going to bowl games, so even that would not have been enough. When it comes to scheduling up, I think there's 2 parts to it. And as you mentioned, the Zips played. Well, they kicked off against Nebraska. That was the only play of the first week, and then watched the Lightning for 3 hours and went home. Then Northwestern the next week, and then at Iowa State the week after that. And it's unusual for them to play 3 games like that in 1 year. Generally, you play those because, first of all, the players like to play them. I mean, the players like to play in big, famous places. They like to test themselves against good competition. I've just found that to be the case. I've done this for 29 years, and you always look forward to those kind of games. If you're going to play in non-conference games, you might as well play those. And the second, obviously, is the money. Can't hide from that fact either, that this is paying 7 figures, and the University of Akron can use it. Generally speaking, you play 2 money games, and then you would play a home game against a group of 5 team like yourself, and then you play an FCS team, usually out of the SWAC or the MEAC, to get a home game and to get your guaranteed win. And for the Zips this year, just 5 home games, and those 3 Power 5s on the road. And actually, Akron is not scheduled to do that again anytime soon, which is probably a good thing. Yeah,
it's very much so. As we're talking with Steve French, the voice of the Akron Zips, joining us here on Sports Talk. And you kind of alluded to at least the monetary value of this game for Akron coming to South Carolina. Obviously, the game for South Carolina, not necessarily as significant as it might have thought of to have been, just because of the fact that they got a victory down the stretch at Ole Miss that I think many didn't necessarily believe could have happened. Many thought that this could have been the game for the Gamecocks that probably got them bowl eligibility as they sit at 6-5 now. What, I guess, from the standpoint of just where Terry Bowden sits and just on your side, now we've heard kind of Ray Tanner's side of the story. Where is Akron's side in the scheduling of this game and how it came about?
For Akron, again, at the time that this game was scheduled, the Zips were 4-3. So they definitely wanted to take a 12th game. One of the reasons being that Nebraska hasn't paid up yet. And they've been a real fill in the blank on that, although it looks like they're finally going to pony up the money here relatively shortly. So next thing you know, I know that Southern Mississippi, I was reading a lot of things, and it looked like Southern Mississippi thought they were going to play South Carolina. And next thing I know, that I believe your athletic director was going to take the first school that was willing to play, and that was definitely Akron. And so we're coming, and this is just how it worked out.
As far as playmakers on the Zips, who is there out there to watch for, both on offense and defense?
Well, offensively, let's face it, it's been a struggle the last week against Ohio University. The Zips put 28 points on the board, which was the most they've had in a game since that Nebraska game. It all revolves around the quarterback, and Cato Nelson has had an excellent year. With injury, he missed a game and a half, but it really all revolves around him. He doesn't do a lot of design runs, but he's a good runner of the football. Now, it's a little less for him now. He has suffered a high ankle sprain against Northern Illinois and missed the rest of that game and missed the following week. But he's really been throwing the football well against Northern in 2.5 quarters. Really good defensive team. He threw for 299. And this last week against Ohio, he had career highs, 356 yards and 4 touchdowns. And as with many teams, but certainly us, he's the man on offense. Defensively, didn't get it done against an Ohio team last week that's averaging almost 50 points a game. They just put it all together. But defensively, had 6 all-conference players on defense, and the right defensive end, sometime linebacker, number 9, Jamal Davis, has had a sensational year, leads the team in sacks, passes batted down, had an interception, tackle for loss, he leads them in. So watch number 9. He's certainly going to get a good look at the NFL level, and he is certainly our defensive team leader.
You alluded to this earlier, Steve, but the mold around the team seems to be very much like a nothing to lose vibe, and almost, like you said, a bowl game type vibe. Yeah, I would put it that way. Everybody wants to play in December. Obviously, this is going to be Akron's last game, and the Zips, Terry Bowden has done a good job of building this thing. So you're talking about 29 seniors who are playing their last game this week. And you know what? I was talking today. I was on this Thursday. I was there talking with Coach Bowden and a couple of players. And football players like to play football. And you tell them there's going to be a game, and they put their pads and helmets on, and they go do it. And I think it's a chance to finish up with a statement. Maybe, I don't know. Obviously, heavy underdogs, but they just want to play football again. Let's face it, for a lot of the guys, this is going to be the last time. And we've got a lot of players from the South, from Florida especially, and playing against an SEC team. I think the guys are really excited about it. I think they'll give a good accounting themselves this Saturday. Steve French, voice of the Akron Zips, against South Carolina and Akron, playing at noon on Saturday at Williams-Brice Stadium on the SEC Alternate Network channel. Appreciate the time, Steve. Safe travels, and enjoyed it. Sure. I love the state of South Carolina, and I've been there in Columbia before. I can't wait to get back. Steve French, voice of the Akron Zips. Sports Talk continues on a Football Friday next on South Carolina Radio Network. Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. It is time for our last opportunity to check in on Clemson and South Carolina. It is 4th and goal with Ellis Johnson for the final week of scheduled games before the bowl season begins. And, Corn, it's obviously also an opportunity to look back on what we learned from the Palmetto Bowl with Ellis.
Absolutely, Coach. Good to have you with us once again. First of all, before we get to that, you were down in Charleston last night watching the Citadel and Charleston Southern, and good way for the Bulldogs to wrap up the season. Very strong performance by them.
Yeah, they really look good. I think the trip to Alabama, when they played well in the first half and executed and was able to stay on the field with them a little while, maybe gave them some confidence. They've had a hard year. I think they lost 2 in overtime, 2 others on the last drive of the game. And they made a change of quarterback about 4 or 5 weeks ago. It looks like the kids got a little chemistry, and hopefully that'll bleed over into next year.
Yep. Now, as far as last week's Palmetto Bowl, Clemson, South Carolina, Tigers win it. And, you know, their offense was fantastic and up and down the field. I guess the talk coming out of the game, besides Clemson winning and finishing 12-0, was just how good USC's offense was and how poor Clemson's defense was. What did you see as the issues with the Clemson defense versus what South Carolina was doing?
Well, early in the game, Phil, it looked like they were bringing a lot of pressure. And Carolina evidently was either well prepared for it or just executed well, but they hit them on a lot of hot routes, one-on-one man coverage. And I think Carolina's receivers have played better over the last few weeks. I think they play early in the season. They were not playing up to the level of their talent, make a lot of jumps and things. They made some super catches, and they were probably a little bit more than Clemson's athletes in the second half could handle. And, you know, just some matchups there where I think Clemson found themselves in an even game in that particular area. So I thought it was a good game for Carolina. Obviously, that's important if they win this next, get a little bounce up in what bowl they go to. But, you know, at the end of the day, Clemson made enough plays. They didn't give up 100 yards rushing, give up a bunch of passing yards, but they also got an interception at a critical time. And when it was all over, they had plenty of defense enough to win that game by 21.
Were Clemson's defensive struggles, Ellis, a one-day outlier, or are these things that can't be correctable?
I think both. I think a little bit. You know, Clemson, in my opinion, has played 2 SEC teams that have pretty good players on that side of the ball. And in both times, they put up points on yards on Clemson. So I think, you know, the ACC is really down this year, Phil. It's just one of those years. They're going to get ready to play a team for the championship that's not even the top 25, not ranked, and as long as Final Four teams. And it's just the level of competition, I think, although Carolina has struggled and had a mediocre season in some ways, they were better players, I think, than Clemson are playing against week in, week out. That being said, they were obviously a better football team that day. They won by 21 points.
Yeah. Talking with Ellis Johnson. So as a defensive coordinator, when you see a team come out in those double pods like South Carolina did, splitting out offensive linemen and mingling them with receivers, how do you counteract that as a defensive coach?
You try to put all kind of special situations in the preseason. Make sure you cover things. Every defense has got to have a base adjustment when they split people out unusually. That, you know, you get receivers out wide, that's what they do. You start moving tight ends out or emptying the backfield with backs or even taking linemen out and putting them in what we used to call a quad or a trio out there. They obviously have better block. But it still creates an adjustment problem for you because you got to put a body out there that will outnumber you. So you don't have to cover him, but you got to have run support on the quick passes and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And if you're not prepared for it, it's confusion is what occurs. And that's why people put those plays in. We always also put on a 10-minute period on Fridays that we ran through a checklist. There's about 13 different types of formations. We hit them every Friday just because they created a certain problem for our base adjustments. And hopefully the players will handle it and, you know, react to it correctly in the game.
You know, Ellis, you said something that kind of struck me when you said South Carolina has had a bit of a mediocre season, and I think a lot of the fan base shares in that analysis. How difficult, though, in your mind, is it to judge USC's body of work, assuming a victory on Saturday against Akron, and then whatever happens in the bowl game? How hard is it to judge in the fact that while their offense has probably progressed to the best point it has under Will Muschamp, the defense took a regression largely due to the attrition that they suffered with their injuries.
That's right. And I mean, you've already explained it all, and there's nothing you can do about that. And I know Coach Muschamp is next man up, and that's what you got to do as a football coach, is just get the next guy through and move on. But, you know, from an outside view, there was obviously a drop-off in some of the guys that had to play more because of the injuries. And, you know, injuries and weather are some things you just can't control in football. And I used the word maybe it wasn't a good choice of words. I just think the expectations were a little higher, and it was disappointing that they left so many really good football players for weeks at a time, and even lost three of them, I think, for the whole season. And it's just very difficult to put a quality team out there week in, week out when you get suffering injuries the way they did this year.
You mentioned weather, and there's going to be a lot of weather in Charlotte tomorrow night. Clemson is a 27.5-point favorite. Does weather even things up to some degree? Is that helpful to the underdog? Could this be something that Clemson is going to have to counter somehow or some way, and it may take away from their wide open passing game and force them to go more to their running game, and something that Pittsburgh would probably like to see happen?
It could if it got extreme. I really think, you said two things you can't control, injuries and the weather, but injury hurts the team against the injury. The weather hurts both teams. So you can't predict the weather, but you have to deal with it. It has to get extremely sloppy before people have to abandon their regular offenses and start being real conservative and try to just make sure they don't turn the football over. So I wouldn't think there'd be conditions up there in that game that would cause that much of a difference. Maybe there are more kids on that team that have played in extremely cold weather, wet, cold weather, and that type of thing. I think once the ball game starts, most of these players have dealt with it at some point in time in their career.
Yeah, it's weird, looking at the forecast, it's going to be rainy, but there's not going to be a lot of wind. I mean, how much, in my mind, you can't junk everything if you're Clemson, but I think maybe you junk the long stuff just because of how wet the ball would be, but I think still you can do some of the short intermediate stuff if the rain comes and just there's not as much wind.
Oh, yeah, and guys, they can keep those balls and these gloves these players wear today vacuum cleaners. The ball sticks to like one of those Velcro ping-pong balls. But there's ways to keep the ball in good shape. It's just that the field gets so bad with the rain. You got to have a lot of rain before that occurs. Frankly, I'd rather be an offensive player on a wet field. I'm not talking about a flooded field, but I'd rather be an offensive player on a wet field than a defensive player, because most of what you're doing in defense is reacting, and footing is more important initially. Whereas offense, you're executing, and obviously you have some footing issues, but it's not like it's much change direction, battling, doing things of that nature. So the wet surface can frequently favor the offense.
Yeah, anyone can cut in the crud. It's about trying to, swivel your hips when you're basically looking at a dirt clod in front of you.
Big difference in action and reaction.
All right, real quick, let's talk USC Akron, and you're obviously familiar with Terry Bowden and his work as a head coach from his Auburn days and other spots. So what do you think he can try and do with his club against the Gamecocks tomorrow?
It'll be difficult. I know Carolina still got a bunch of good players out, but Akron has thrown the ball decently well this year. They've not had a very successful season, but what little bit of research I was able to dig up on them, someone said they really were throwing the ball pretty well. That would not be a good matchup with Carolina's injuries. But I just feel like they'll be ready to play, and if 7th win will make a lot of difference when they go to a bowl game, location-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like Carolina, the point spread will be so wide away after the second quarter. The defense, I think, should be able to play a more one-dimensional game. And Terry's done a good job up there. I also know that Chuck Kamada, who a lot of Carolina Clemson fans would know from his days at NC State as a head coach, and then Florida State as assistant head coach. He runs the defense or did for a while for Terry. So they've got some good players, and they'll have some really good, well coached. I think Carolina's offense right now is really playing as well as they have during the season, and I expect them to put up points very early and make the game a little more one-dimensional.
Hey, Coach, we thank you as always. Have a great weekend and a great holiday season, and we'll catch you on the other side of the holidays and talk some bowl games with you.
Sounds great. Thanks, Phil.
Thank you. Ellis Johnson with us here on Sports Talk.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at sportstalksc.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Back we are, Phil Kornblut here in the studio. By the way, Professor Tom Hayes has had the night off, if you haven't noticed, and Will Pelagic has hightailed it over to the Colonial Life Arena to take in the South Carolina Coastal Carolina game. He joins us from the arena where not a whole heck of a lot of defense played for the most part, though the Gamecocks have tightened it up here late, but they got a good one going on there, Will.
They certainly do, Corn. It's interesting looking at this game. It is definitely not being played at the pace that Frank Martin would like, or being played at the defensive intensity that Frank Martin would like, but South Carolina does have a 47-41 lead with 47 seconds left to play in the opening half. Keyshawn Bryant was just called for a charge right here in the near side court here. There's a little bit of a delay because of the fact that the Coastal Carolina player who took the charge was injured on the play. A.J. Lawson, 12 points to lead the Gamecocks, shooting 41% from the field, including 41% from downtown. But one thing that has been a characteristic of this one, which has been a characteristic of South Carolina early in this season, is foul trouble for the entire team, including Chris Silva, who picked up 2 early fouls in the opening 5 minutes of play. So he is sat for most of the half. Felipe Haste, Keyshawn Bryant, Alonzo Frink all have 2 fouls. So it should be interesting to see how Frank Martin plays this lineup here over the course of this next couple of minutes. They have not gotten a field goal in the last 2:32 has South Carolina, but Coastal has turned over 5 times in the final 5 minutes. Less than a minute to play in the opening half. 47-41 Gamecocks leading Coastal Carolina, Court.
All right, thank you very much, Willie P. Speaking of the Gamecocks, P.J. Dozier called up from the G League by the Boston Celtics. And the Celtics are playing Cleveland tonight. And, of course, they're not playing all that well. They're losing 42-41. Let's see if PJ's gotten in the game at all tonight. No, has not gotten in there yet. He was called up to the big league. Can you call it the big league? To the big league club by the primary Celtics team from the G League. So good luck to him as he tries to stick in the NBA. Let's update some high school football scores that are available. It's Green Sea Floyd's leading Hemingway, 1A semifinals, 14-0. It's Barnwell over Carver's Bay, 2A semifinals, 7-6. Dutch Fork in that 5A semifinal, leading Somerville, 6-0. It's Daniel over Greer, and that's a 7-0 score. The other 5A semifinal, it's Burns leading TL Hanna, 13-7. Of course, TL Hanna is an undefeated team. And let's see, I want to double-check something here very quickly, make sure I've got the right classifications for the schools. Yeah, that Greer-Daniel game, that's in the 4A playoffs, of course. And so that was a 4A semifinal score. And let's see, Myrtle Beach and Hartsville, they are tied at 7. And that's the other 4A playoff game, the other 4A semifinal. Don't forget, we'll have the high school football scoreboards coming up for you tonight. We'll have all the final scores for you. And David Shelton here to break it all down. We'll have those for you tonight at 10, 10:30, and 11. So that's what we've got so far as the scores coming in at this point. Let's see. What else I wanted to mention to you here? Mentioned P.J. Dozier getting called up by the Celtics, so that's good for him. Also see where Mac Brown is in the process of putting his staff together, and he's added 3 more assistants to his new staff at North Carolina. Joining him, according to a statement released by the school, former Tar Heel great Dre Bly, Tim Brewster, who previously coached at North Carolina, and Tim Cross. Tommy Thigpen, who played for Brown and returned to the North Carolina staff last January, also has been elevated to co-defensive coordinator and will continue to coach safeties. Let's see. Bly will coach cornerbacks, Brewster tight ends, and Cross will coach the defensive line. And so Mac Brown continues to put his new staff together. A few other notes to pass along to you. A couple of things from today and a couple of things we didn't get to yesterday. The Touchstone Energy Bowl has some replacement on the North roster. So Ethan Alexander, excuse me, defensive back from Greer, goes onto the roster. DeJuan McCullum from Nation Ford goes onto the roster, and Julius Thompson from Southside Christian added to the roster. Dallas Corbett from Gray Collegiate, who was on the roster, was moved up to the Shrine Bowl. He replaces Cooper Dawson of Hanahan, who was out with an ACL injury. How about this news from the Braves? Shake up in the broadcast booth for the Braves. Jeff Francoeur, the former Clemson signee who never played at Clemson, of course, went on and played in the major leagues, a lot of years with the Braves. He is going to become the primary analyst for Braves television now, replacing Joe Simpson. And Joe Simpson, his role has been reduced just 10 months after he was inducted into the Braves Hall of Fame. So Francoeur, 34 years old, and a native of Gwinnett County. And so he will jump into the TV booth. Simpson will be back for a 28th season. He will do radio for most games and about 20 to 30 television games. And let's see here. It also says Chip Caray returns for his 16th season as TV play-by-play, working alongside Francoeur, who'll do about 105 games. Tom Glavine will also work some games, and I mentioned Simpson will do some games as well. This story also says radio play-by-play man Jim Powell will work fewer games than he has in the past. Don't know what that means in terms of the numbers, but that is the story. Pre-game and post-game host Ben Ingram, considered an up-and-coming talent for years, will have his role increased, doing more play-by-play as a fourth member of the rotation. So I'm wondering if Ingram is bumping Powell out of some play-by-play duties. That's not going to sit well with the Jim Powell that we know. So we'll see what happens with that. The Braves intend to stick with 2 radio broadcasters per game and probably will have Sutton work with Ingram and Powell with Simpson on most occasions. Sutton reduced his schedule for health reasons in recent years and rarely does road games. So there you go, Braves fans. A little shake up there. Yesterday, they announced the Sun Belt football postseason honors, and I wanted to mention that a kid from Marlboro County was named the Defensive Player of the Year, Ronheen Bingham, who is a senior defensive lineman at Arkansas State out of Marlboro County, named the Defensive Player of the Year. So congratulations to him. I think that covers everything to this point. Let's update what's happening over at USC basketball. The Gamecocks now have spread their lead to 9. They're up 50-41 as they have gone to halftime. Good shooting first half for the Gamecocks, shooting 42.5%. 8 of 18 behind the line, 8 of 9 at the free throw line, and Coastal shooting 41.4%, 7 of 13 from 3, 10 of 13 at the line. A.J. Lawson leading the Gamecocks with an even dozen. Coatsar's got 7. Bryant has 7. And leading the way for Coastal Carolina is Zach Cuthbertson, who's having a terrific year so far early on. He's got 13 points on the night. And as Will mentioned, Silva in early foul trouble, and I'm sure that's not sitting well with Frank Martin and company. Let's see. Silva has 3 points in 5 minutes. They got to get more out of him, of course. All right, a reminder, we have our high school football scoreboards for you tonight, 10, 10:30, and 11. You're looking for the scores, we'll have them for you here, plus the analysis of David Shelton. Tomorrow, I'll be covering the Akron USC game. Follow on Twitter. Look for the post game on the website. Will be in Charlotte to cover the Tigers and the Panthers in the ACC championship game. Follow him on Twitter, and, of course, later in the evening, the post game coverage on the website. That's what we have for you. Otherwise, have a fabulous weekend. Thanks for joining us all week here on Sports Talk. We appreciate you. We appreciate our stations. For Brian Leonard, Tom Hayes, Will Pelagic, Phil Kornblut, have a great night and a great weekend.